After watching the trailer for Barbie, you probably thought that you would get a fish out of water experience with Barbie and Ken leaving the safety and security of their home behind. As they venture out into the real world, their naive and innocent attitudes leaves them completely ill-equipped to deal with our much more complicated reality, forcing them to grow and mature as characters.
Oh, really?
But after watching this mess of a movie, it turns out that all of that marketing behind this was absolute bullshit, as it turns out that Barbie is a fucking horror story written from the villain's perspective. The Barbies treat the Kens that live in Barbie Land as second-class citizens whose only purpose is to serve the Barbies in whatever way they see fit. And the only way the Barbies can keep the much more stronger Kens in line is to emotionally abuse them by filling their heads full of self-doubt and teaching them that the only value a Ken can have is that if a Barbie pays attention to him. They have been psychologically conditioned to love their abusers as if they have a serious case of Stockholm Syndrome. Considering the sheer amount of emotional abuse the Kens go through on a daily basis, the suicide rate of Kens must be through the roof. It wouldn't surprise me if the reasons why the fields are so green is because behind Barbie Land there are mass graves filled with Kens. Greta tries to make a shallow comparison by equating the problems the Kens go through in Barbie Town with what women who live in our own reality deal with. Not the ones who live in the Middle East who have actual real problems, but the ones in America, you know, the most sexist country in the world. Now, this complete failure of a comparison not only shows us how much of a retard she is, but also goes to show just how privileged feminists like her are. The West is so repressive against women that they gave an empty-headed fuck like Greta a $145 million movie for her to use as a massive hit piece on men. If that isn't proof that we live in a sexist society, then I don't know what is. I find it funny how feminists like Greta always point their criticisms at specific countries in the world. Countries in which she can feel completely safe to mock openly, and yet she refuses to acknowledge other countries in which Greta's opinions might put her in potential danger.
You fucking hypocrite.
Considering that Greta is such a rabid feminist, we shouldn't have been surprised that Barbie turned out to be such a piece of shit. I mean, the woman only really has one story to tell. Barbie, a movie about how difficult it is to be a woman in the 21st century, which is totally different from her previous work, Little Women, a movie about how difficult it is to be a woman in the 19th century, which is even more different than her upcoming work on the hyper-feminist Snow White movie, which is all about how difficult it is to be a woman in a fantasy setting. I don't know what she will write after Snow White, but I can already guess as to what the plot is going to be.
Man.
So now that Barbie has been released, the shill media naturally comes to its defense, not by complimenting the movie on its own merits, but instead insult the audience in a desperate bid to garner attention from the soulless cocksuckers in Hollywood, who are the only reason these people have any relevancy at all, because at the end of the day, they are whores. Well, I don't suck corporate cock like these fuckers do, so relax as I break down the abomination that is Barbie. We are introduced to Barbie Land, which is run entirely by Barbies, and what they do all day is try to replicate what we do in the real world, but with feminism. Barbie's perfect life of doing fuck all every day is then interrupted when she starts to feel sad and depressed all of a sudden. She is told that the girl who is playing with her in the real world is now miserable, and somehow her emotions have opened a portal that is directly affecting Barbie. How? Fuck if I know. So because of that, Barbie is forced to venture out into the real world to find and cheer up the girl. Ken decides to tag along and together they go look for her. But whilst Barbie is out looking, Ken starts to be treated like an actual human being for the first time in his life, and he starts to develop a sense of self-worth. But as all of this is happening, the FBI inform Mattel that Barbie and Ken have escaped Barbie Land. So does everybody in this universe know that the dolls the little girls are playing with are in fact alive, and that every girl who mistreats their doll is torturing an actual living person? Not only that, but the adults actively encouraged their children to commit such horrendous acts of cruelty. Imagine being a kid playing with a toy only to find out that you have been torturing someone the whole time. You would be psychologically fucked for the rest of your life. Anyway, Barbie eventually finds her owner Sasha, who is, for lack of a better word, a cunt. She goes on to give a giant lecture to Barbie about how because fat women can't resist the urge to shove cake down their throats every 20 minutes, that it's Barbie's fault for being thin and making them feel bad about themselves.
Are you a complete retard?
You might also find it surprising that an extremely privileged rich girl who lives in Los Angeles styles herself as a communist and gives a massively ironic lecture about the evils of capitalism that has allowed her the freedom and wealth to give such a retarded lecture.
Is this clear enough? You're a fucking idiot.
So Mattel show up and try to take Barbie back to her world when she decides to run for it. As she tries to escape, she stumbles across a random room which happens to have the creator of Barbie living in it.
Why?
Why exactly is this super rich woman living in a makeshift kitchen in the HQ of the building? Fuck if I know, other than we needed a contrived reason for these two to meet. They talk about fuck all and she just gives her tea.
What the fuck am I watching?
Barbie eventually escapes the facility, but is rescued by the dumb fucking commie and her mother. It's then revealed that it was her mother who has been transferring her sadness to Barbie, because despite being a grown fucking woman with a teenage daughter, she got sad and played with her daughter's dolls and drew pictures like a fucking 7-year-old. Does every woman in this movie suffer some sort of mental illness? Because they act like they do. Barbie eventually takes the pair of them back to Barbie Land, but finds out that Ken has returned earlier, and after reading all about the patriarchy, he helps the other Kens to take over, which makes all of them happy, and even the women seem happier too. Now this would normally be considered a good ending, because the Kens have finally achieved freedom and have agency over their own lives. Well, unfortunately for us, this is a horror, so the monster that is Barbie decides to ruin this happy ending by using the power of feminism to retake control over Barbie Land. Once again, the Kens are forced back into being second-class citizens that only live to serve Barbie.
This is pure evil.
The final scene, for some fucking reason, is Barbie going to a gynecologist.
It's a piece of shit.
So with how much Greta clearly despises men, you've got to wonder who exactly was the man who dumped Greta so hard that she vowed to waste the rest of her life making misandry cat shit like this as a petty form of revenge.
That's just sad.
Before this was released, Greta said in an interview that gender hierarchy are a problem no matter which gender is in charge. And yet she chose to end the movie by having the Kens subjugated once again and Barbie Land continuing to be a matriarchy. So either she's a complete liar or she doesn't understand what the fuck she is saying. This film was boring, poorly written, filled with shallow messages, weak characters, contrivances everywhere, and was about as entertaining as scraping your balls across sandpaper.
Well, that was fucking dreadful.